Hello, Dr. Larum. This is our Asians320 presentation on major dams in Asia and their effects. In our presentation, we will be discussing the Mekong River, the Three Gorges Dam in China, as well as some problems and benefits of having hydroelectricity throughout Asia. We will also be discussing their effects on the environment and on people. And we will be providing some solutions towards the end to better utilize these hydroelectricity dams. This will be presented to you by the Dream Team. My name is Abdurrahman Bu'ul.
My name is Brian Graybill.
My name is June Kim. So before we go into the specific dams that we have chosen, we want to get to educate the audience on how a dam works and basically what it is. And a dam is a man-made structure across a river, and the purpose of a hydropower dam is to produce electricity and control water flow, as well as provide easier navigation. Basically, how a hydropower dam works is the natural current of the stream turns the turbine, and it basically, within the generator, it creates electricity. And how this is done is when a rotor spins against a conductor, and this causes electricity to be made.
Okay, on to a little general overview of the area of Asia that we'll be talking about. Both rivers are born from the Himalayan plateau and the mountains from glacial flow, and the Yangtze River flows down into China from the east into central agricultural area of China and down into the coast urbanized area, where the Three Gorges Dam is in the centralized China where they're doing agricultural, where water is needed the most, and where the majority of the population lives next to the coast. And on the other river we'll be discussing during this presentation is the Mekong, which comes down into Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand.
Before getting into the Mekong River dams, I want to stress the importance of the Mekong River itself. And the Mekong River is an important ecosystem for the Southeast Asia because there is such an abundant and diverse amount of species living in it. It has been reported that more than 1,100 species of fish live in the Mekong, and that includes the Irrawaddy dolphin, giant stingray, the carp, and the Mekong catfish. And it is ranked the second largest fishery just after the Amazon River. This is important because more than 300 million people live along the Mekong River, and 80% of these locals rely on it for food and agriculture. They mostly eat fish for their protein, so this river provides that for them. And the Mekong also helps with flood mitigation, water storage during dry season, and wastewater treatment. So in recent years, there has been a boom for dams because Southeast Asia has a high demand for energy, and it doesn't want to depend on foreign countries for investment. Out of all the dams in the Mekong, there are two projected dams that will cause the most harm to the Mekong because it blocks fish immigration and is relatively close to spawning areas where fish lay their eggs and spawn. These two dams are the Xayaburi Dam and the Sisan 2 Dam. And I believe the Xayaburi Dam is still in construction. And first, the Xayaburi Dam costed $3.5 billion, and it stretches over 32 meters in length. It produces over 1,285 megawatts of power, which equates to about 7,500 gigawatt hours annually. On the other hand, Sazan 2 Dam costed $800 million and covers a length of 7,729 meters. It produces 400 megawatts of power, which equates to an annual generation of 1,998 gigawatt hours. These two dams will produce a lot of energy, but ironically, 95% of it will be sold to Vietnam. and not go towards like the locals living near the Mekong River. These projects were approved by the MRC, and it's basically the Mekong River Commission, which is an alliance of Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos. And they basically have the ability to control what goes on the Mekong. Lastly, I want to point out that China has also created massive dams up north, and because they aren't a part of the MRC, they can do so without being affected by the consequences. Usually, the lower Mekong people are impacted the most by the dams built, and obviously, China won't be affected that much. In this slide, I want to discuss the economic and ecological aspects of the dams in the Mekong. So dams obviously produce relatively clean energy, which equates to about 14,700 megawatts annually. And this is just the lower half of the Mekong dams. This helps urbanize the Southeast Asia, which leads to economic growth and less foreign dependency. On the other hand, it has many ecological impacts. One consequence is that it diminishes flood pools, which affects fish spawning and soil conditions. As a result, fish population decreases, which the locals are obviously dependent on for selling and eating. As for the soil erosion and sediment buildup, it causes infertile soil, which affects their agriculture, and further pollution to the river. Lastly, speaking to the last point, the construction of dams take 7 years, like roughly 7 years plus, and so the process alone brings a lot of complaints from locals because of the noise and all the disruptions going on. And basically, if you add the factor of that and diminishing fish population, infertile soil, and water fluctuations, locals are kind of pushed away from their native land. So in this slide, I want to discuss possible solutions for the Mekong dams that are causing a lot of ecological problems. And environmentalists have proposed that Southeast Asia should invest more into research so that they can find specific places on the Mekong where fish migration is limited and it doesn't greatly impact the spawning areas. Um, this requires a lot of research, time, and money, and so it is going to take a long time and it will be difficult. Another option is to invest more into solar and wind energy.
Now that June has discussed the Mekong River and some of the dams associated with it and some of the benefits, we will be moving on to the Three Gorges Dam. A little bit of geographic information on the Three Gorges Dam. It is located along the Yangtze River in China, which is 3,915 miles long. And there are a whopping 50,000 dams and 700 tributaries that are upstream from the Three Gorges Dam. The Three Gorges Dam is approximately 2,000 plus meters long and 185 meters high, and its storage capacity is at 39.3 billion cubic meters of water. So while the Three Gorges Dam has many benefits, it also has some environmental impacts, and some of those that we'll be going into are the pollution that it creates, the earthquakes and landslides and mudslides associated with it, the changes in weather, the droughts, and the species that are lost or affected by this dam. So now that we have discussed some of the geographic qualities or characteristics associated with the Three Gorges Dam, we'll be diving into the geological background of the Three Gorges Dam. The Three Gorges Dam sits on two major faults, which names I cannot pronounce, but you can read. It also has caused some geologic changes on the land, such as shoreline erosion, increased water depth behind the dam, less variable water flow, and the decrease in sediment downstream.
Now that AR has given us a geographic as well as geological background of the Three Gorges Dam, I'll be discussing the benefits that this dam produces for the surrounding population, as it produces 84.6 billion kilowatt hours of electricity per year. It also provides China with 35 to 40% of its fresh water for the people and for agriculture. It is a huge resource of food for the 480 million people living in the area surrounding the lake and as well as the reservoir of this dam. For there are 350 species of fish that live in the river as well as dam, and 6,388 species of plants. Another huge benefit of this dam is the reduction of carbon, as it reduces consumption of 319 million metric tons of coal that would have been used, and reduces the output of 858 million tons of carbon if they were to be burning such things as coal for energy. And now on to some negatives in which the Three Gorges dams has, as it traps 172 million tons of sediment per year on average, and this reduces the fertility of the soil downriver because these sediments aren't flowing downriver, and 33 billion tons of wastewater are dumped annually into the reservoir as well as the river, and half of this is industrial waste. And this is also causes algae blooms that kill a lot of fish and wildlife due to eutrophication, which then causes the algae bloom, and then which causes a reduction in dissolved oxygen in the water, which produces dead zones. Now, some additional negatives that the Three Gorges Dam are associated with is that 1.4 million people were displaced as of 2016 with the construction of this dam and the filling of the reservoir and the flooding that occurs with it. And this included 140 towns, 1,350 villages, and additionally, it increases the earthquake reoccurrence interval, as it's linked to 3,000 minor earthquakes and to the 2008 earthquake that killed over 82,000 people. But it is yet to be proven that the dam was the main reason why this major earthquake occurred. And this dam increases the landslides by 70%, and there were 355 more than predicted by 2012. Okay, so retouching on the concept of pollution in the Three Gorges Dam, as again 33 billion tons of wastewater are dumped annually, and half of this is industrial waste. And with the industrial waste comes heavy metal pollutants. And as this water is used for agriculture purposes, and for example in rice, with the heavy metals in the water, this creates cadmium rice, which makes, if you eat it, it makes you very sick and can lead to death. And in a conservation effort, 150,000 to 200,000 cubic meters of solid waste are cleaned up on average a year. And due to these pollutants, eutrophication occurs, which we will go into later.
As Brian stated earlier about algae blooms, now we'll be diving a little bit deeper into it, giving a little bit more of a, description on exactly what it is. Algae blooms occur from pollution and runoff, usually from fertilizer, which causes eutrophication, which is the abundance of nutrients in the water, such as nitrogen and other chemicals, are what lead to algae blooms, which in turn suck up all the oxygen in the water and suffocate, killing many fish and disrupt the ecosystem. So now that we have introduced and explained to you guys how the Three Gorges Dam works, operates, and the benefits associated with it, as well as some of the negatives, we'd like to offer some comparison to other dams around the world. As you can see, the Three Gorges Dam leads it by a lot in the amount of annual kilowatt hours of electricity produced, while the Aswan Dam comes in second with 10 billion kilowatt hours of electricity produced yearly. Now that we have compared some of the hydroelectricity produced by some of these dams, we'd like to touch a little bit on Asian disasters that have occurred by dams failing. And, by far, the biggest has been the Banqiao Dam, which failed in 1975 in China, causing 171,000 fatalities due to the amount of people that live in China and the amount of people that live in close quarters, the density population in China.
As we've discussed through this presentation, there are major benefits as well as negatives to all dams around the world, and these dams are a major breakthrough in the urbanization of our world, and though they may be benefiting the human race, there's major drawbacks to the ecology of the environment. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and have a great winter break.